Welcome everybody to the Hedera Savannah Meetup. We meet, typically we meet every first Monday of the month. This month, due to Labor Day, we went ahead and moved it to the second Monday of the month. So we're off our normal schedule today. Hopefully the people in the meetup.com world and all of our normal guests, hopefully they caught the memo. My name is Jeremy Fletcher. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Ledgerama. My partner Rob is also here in the audience. We started Ledgerama with the mission of building trust online, and we currently just got through the security audit of our first production release of Walla Wallet. So we're really excited to have gotten through our security audit. And tonight we are joined. Oh, and this is hosted by Creative Coast. Creative Coast is an entrepreneur group here in Savannah, Georgia, that does a whole lot for the tech community here in Georgia. They're working on all kinds of great stuff. We've got working on a port logistics corridor, a technology corridor to help support port logistics. Savannah is, I want to say it's the second, perhaps the third. It might be the third, but I want to say it's the second biggest port on the East Coast. So we support all kinds of supply chain and port logistics stuff here in Savannah, and Creative Coast has been gracious enough to host us both pre-COVID when we had when we were in the physical venue, and now virtually. So we're very grateful to the Creative Coast. And tonight we're joined by Michael McDonald, CEO and founder of 3IEIO, and also Michael Llewellyn, the CTO over at 3IEIO, which is a hot new employee engagement app that we've been really excited about all the way going back to 2018. And excited to see all the progress that 3IEIO has made over the years. Had some great success over the past few months, and it looks like we're primed for success over the next few coming months. So really excited to have you on. I love using this as an opportunity to showcase the folks that are building on Hedera. And it's been a fun opportunity. We've had some really talented, bright and shiny examples of the folks and projects that are building on Hedera. So we're grateful to have you. And so with all of that stuff said, I will go ahead and hand it over to, since we've got Michael McDonald and Michael Llewellyn, I'm going to go ahead, Mac, I'm going to resort to calling you Mac throughout, if that's all right by you. And so
of course.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, Mac, and kind of just let you talk a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background, and if we want to, we'll get into a little bit about how you came into Hedera and all that kind of stuff. But I'll let you take it over for a minute.
Sure, I'll try to keep it interesting for the audience. First of all, thank you, Jeremy, and the folks at Creative Coast for hosting this and for accommodating us. We love any opportunity we can get to be in front of an audience and talk about what our baby, what we've built, and what we're doing. It is very exciting. So we'll dive into that. We're prepared today to kind of show you from two perspectives, really. One, I'm gonna attempt to show you from the perspective of the customer that might actually adopt 3IEIO as a solution. To hopefully achieve certain goals or positive business outcomes. And then I also will, and I've got Michael Llewellyn here to aid me in this. The other perspective, which would be, let's lift up the hood, so to speak, and see how the sausage is made for the more technically inclined audience members that are out there that want to see all the magic stuff that we put together in our secret weapon, Hedera Hashgraph. So my background is not very technical, primarily in sales and business operations and business management software, starting in the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem for the vast majority of my tenure and career. And as of recent, I've worked with a lot of SaaS, software as a service startups, some flops, some wins, but nonetheless some great experiences. And that brings me to present day with 3IEIO and what we're doing here. So that's a little bit of a background on me.
All right, and Michael Llewellyn, if you wouldn't mind jumping in with a little bit about your own background and how you came into this crazy world we're living in.
Sure thing. So I've been doing blockchain and just general weird DLT tech since about 2012. Started with Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in high school. Realized I could basically print money off of a computer, which was pretty cool, and went from there into kind of general consulting in the practice, started from IT and then eventually more programming, especially as blockchain, not Bitcoin, became more of a thing as well. And so been around since basically the beginning. Saw Hedera first release their like kind of go public. It wasn't even Hedera then, it was like Swirls and Hashgraph, like end of 2017. And then from there, Hedera came through and through a few hackathons. Met Mac before the first and ended up coming up with the concept of, well, really coming up with a way to deliver on his vision for 3IO, which was to figure out a way to build an HR solution that was interoperable, wasn't dealing with the same issues he'd seen in the past. And after placing in the last hackathon, we've been trying to figure out the next step for 3IO and how to, you know, build it into a real product that we'll see a lot of customers coming through soon.
Great. So with that idea of a real product, Matt, could you talk about what the product is, what problem you're solving, and why this is something, you know, why this is something that you've poured so much heart and soul into? I know both of you have poured, you know, all of us in the, you know, in the entrepreneurial world, that's the path that we follow. You know, you've got to pour your heart and soul into something. So Mac, if you could tell us a little bit about the problem you're solving and why you're putting so much energy into it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to challenge the audience here because this, what I've found is 3IO in a sense is a very simple, straightforward solution to a pretty simple and straightforward problem today as in its current form. It starts to get complex and confusing when you start to look at why we built in the Hedera Hashgraph component and we start talking about decentralized identifiers and those sorts of things, because that starts to open up all the little light bulbs and gears start turning in people's heads of what it could evolve into. So there's two parts that I'm going to challenge you guys on. The first part we're going to talk about is the employee engagement, verified employee recognition, verified workforce reputations. Those are some of the terms you're going to hear me use when I explain this. And then the second is like all the other dream stuff. Okay. And why am I so passionate about 3IO? The reason being is because I actually, well, first of all, my degree's in industrial organizational psychology, Michigan State University. And I've worked with a lot of HR tech, human capital management solutions in my day. The most recent was an employee engagement, employee recognition solution that was really cool. And we ended up selling that company in 2018. And it offered for what we call meaningful recognition. So, and meaningful recognition means two employees could always recognize each other in any way. I could recognize you, Jeremy, for having an awesome party over the weekend because you and I worked together and we were celebrating something in your life, and that's really cool. I could recognize, Lena Tran for wearing some awesome Tory Burch sandals and say, hashtag flossing or something. These are kind of frivolous ways that employees interact on a day-to-day, and that has its place in the workplace. But what we're talking about here is meaningful recognition. There are ways that employees just naturally engage with each other that you could derive some really interesting cultural insights from. And what we found is those are when is an employee demonstrating a skill set that's important to their role or to the organization's goals? When is an employee demonstrating a value or a shared behavior, a core value, if you will? And so we offer a platform that allows for easy adoption for employees to recognize each other and socialize this recognition so everyone gets to have visibility and learn from this to see how values and skill sets that are important to the organization get lived out. Full stop. That's what 3IO is today. That's it. It sounds pretty trivial, but where the magic starts to come in, I won't get ahead of myself now, is DID and verified ledgers of this data start to do some really cool things for organizations that really want to capture, drive, and build their internal cultures far better than employee engagement surveys and other things that we've been doing for decades that we just hope one day will work, but they won't. And then also the employee, these employees that want to just, think about it this way. How cool would it be if you could look back at the last 5 years of your career, regardless of where you worked, and just see how the world recognized you in a meaningful way and the way you recognize the world. The idea is this, and then I'll take a breath, is the way that the world recognizes you in that meaningful way is indicative of your strengths, and the absence of recognition of skill sets and values might be indicative of areas of improvement if you have certain career aspirations. So it's great to take that data and learn how to apply it as you build and grow forward as a person in your career. Conversely, the way you recognize the world around you might be indicative of what makes you tick, what resonates with you, your intrinsic motivators. So what we found is employees start to learn something about themselves, how to actually do career pathing, to grow within their careers, who to mentor with, who to engage with, what values and skill sets are important to improve and grow in your, whatever your aspirations may be. And another byproduct of just simply doing that very trivial use case we talked about earlier, just meaningful recognition exchange and capture, is also that HR teams get all the cultural insights that they need to see of how well their values are being lived out throughout the organization, ways that they can improve engagement, skill sets, those sorts of things. So it's a very simple way to means to the same end. So that's why I'm so passionate about it, because we found this, and it's not just some idea I came up with after a long night out at the bar or anything like this. This has been proven. There are several companies out there that are using meaningful recognition solutions, and they're capturing this data, but they're just not capturing it as well as they could, and they're not using it as well as they could. And that's where the decentralization of this data and DID and those sorts of things come in and really just hammer it home. So now I'm taking a breath.
Having come from a big telco company that certainly has an employee recognition and engagement program that they're working on, I can definitely speak from experience, though, that it could benefit from some better metrics, largely a lot more engagement, right? Since one of those things I've heard you talk about before is that engagement is a big issue, and this I think your solution lends a lot towards the engagement aspect. One thing that I wanted to bring up was this term DID. I don't know if I don't think we've gotten too much into a discussion about DID and what that is. So for the folks in the audience that may not be familiar with DID, I'm going to ask this of Michael Llewellyn. If you could just talk a little bit about DID. What is DID? And because I come from the telco world, DID to us used to be direct inward dialing, right? So it was a service that was offered on top of a primary rate interface, but that's not the DID that we're talking about. Llewellyn, could you speak a little bit about DID and how that fits into the 3IIO solution?
Sure. So funny you say that, because of the people that I've heard say they've heard of DID before is typically dissociative identity disorder. So I guess that's a better one. It's at least in the same ballpark of tech. But the really fascinating thing about DID is, and in a way, I guess you could almost compare it to dissociative identity disorder in terms of you can have multiple identities on the internet and you can ultimately start building them in a way that actually becomes real. They're not like having a Facebook or Twitter account where ultimately it's just, you're getting your identity just from one source. There's one person out there on the internet that says, this is who you are, Michael Llewellyn or Mac McDonald. And what I've seen is, we'll see examples like Twitter where they got hacked at one point earlier this year. People wanted to get Bitcoin. And sure enough, the former president of the United States was asking people for Bitcoin, and people assumed that message came from him. And so because Twitter was the only person that could, was responsible for that identity. So what we see DID is basically it's a standard that's come from the internet through the W3C, and there's been a lot of work from multiple parties on this. There's something that Microsoft and many other companies have been deeply involved with, and ultimately it's an identity that can potentially be interoperable with any provider on the internet. They just like a browser talks to anyone with HTML through the World Wide Web. Anyone could chat, essentially compare identities and verify them using the DID standard. So you could have an identity from your employer, from your spouse, from the government, and all these could be controlled by you instead of being controlled by any one party. And that's ultimately what we want to do with 3AIO, is we want to make it so that anyone who creates an identity on our platform can also share it with other people, go to other employees, employers, and ultimately carry it through their career. No, don't just, they don't want it just to be locked up with one person, one employer, or one company.
So this DID, this DID that you mentioned, it's a standard, it's a protocol, much like HTTP or TCP/IP. There's a number of standards, and of course these protocols and standards are generated by organizations. You mentioned the W3C. For the audience members that may not be familiar with the W3C, could you just kind of mention what that is and why anybody should care about who they are?
Yeah, so it stands for World Wide Web Consortium. So it's actually the founder of this organization was Tim Berners-Lee, who also created the internet. So it's the closest thing we have to a kind of universal standards board for what we use on the internet. And so it's done a lot of specification work around, for example, I could go through the list. It's HTML, JSON, WebAssembly, which is kind of a new cool thing on the block, XML. So like a lot of things that to someone who does development on the internet is considered a standard. Like all these things are what every website is built from ultimately. It's obviously a very good authority. So when they are also saying, here's how you should use identities, it's definitely something that we've seen people take seriously. And so that's why we're pretty confident in DID. And with the fact that then DID is also compatible with distributed ledgers, including Hedera, with Hedera having actually issued some guidance on how to implement it properly, we see it as the perfect, kind of the new stack of how people should be identifying themselves. And we're the first ones doing that in the HR space.
And,
right.
and so, if I could interject really quick there, Jeremy, and just dumbing that down even further for the audience, what that means is we're making sure that we're doing everything we can to build this right. We intentionally chose Hedera Hashgraph as what I'll just speak for myself here and consider to be a third, fourth generation distributed ledger technology platform. So when you talk about, not to diss any other blockchain platforms out there, but Hashgraph is different from blockchain in many great ways. So I'll invite you guys to check out Hedera Hashgraph and their consensus algorithm and their method and why they're different and better for throughput and security and privacy and fairness. But what we're really trying to do with 3IIO is now take that plus these proven standardizations in this new space and allow you, the employee, to actually capture these really important, useful interactions that you're having already. You're already having them. Let's capture them and use them in ways that you can grow your career. And as a byproduct, let your employer at the present time use that for awesome cultural insights. There are now, that's again, the full stop is there. Down the road, this gets you comfortable and familiar with the DID concept and all these other things like credentialing and licensure and all these other things that DID use cases could be and will eventually be. You're already there. You're already comfortable with it. You have a profile. These can be incorporated. So that's the idea.
Right. And so DID is not just something that was cooked up within the crypto community or within Hedera Hashgraph community or by 3IIO. It's important to note that W3C putting its stamp and its blessing and essentially being responsible for the creating of the standard really, I think just does a lot to just to state its legitimacy, right? It's not something that's in-house or something that that we cooked up ourselves and talked about. This is something that's recognized on a global scale. And in my opinion, decentralized identity is going to be a big part of the future. I mean, everything from driver's licenses to passports to whether or not I've had a vaccine that may be coming down the road. I mean, there's all kinds of use cases, nefarious, great, beneficial, or otherwise. There's all kinds of use cases for DID that are coming down the pike. And I'm convinced that it's the future. And that's part of the reason I'm excited to have you guys on. So Mac, one of the things I wanted to ask you was we hadn't really talked about how it is that you came across Hedera Hashgraph. And again, for the folks out there that may not be familiar with Hedera Hashgraph, of course, there's always folks here that are coming in from all walks of life. Some of them are coming from the Hedera Hashgraph Telegram channel, so they're already familiar with Hedera. Obviously, those of us that are in the Hedera space are familiar with it. And I definitely encourage anybody out there that's wondering, okay, well, I jumped into this thing. What is Hedera Hashgraph? Well, there's tons of really cool videos. The CEO, Mance Harmon, is one of my favorite people to watch online. I mean, he is just such a great speaker, so well spoken, and just comes across as a genuinely good guy, right? And same thing with Lehman Baird, right? Who is the CTO of Hedera Hashgraph. They're just really engaging people to watch, and always. So I highly encourage anybody that doesn't know about Hedera Hashgraph to really dig in. Hedera.com, which is their website, is an awesome website, really well designed, really pretty, and got tons and tons of information, and it's really well organized. So I encourage anybody out there that's not familiar. I apologize if we're not diving into what Hedera is, but for those of us that are already entrenched in the community, I don't want to do too much rehashing of information that we already know. But again, encourage anybody that's not familiar with Hedera to dig in a little bit and find out more. That all being said, how did you get into Hedera, Mac? What was that moment where you said, okay, this is something that I want to be a part of. This is something that I want to build on top of, or just a little bit about the background and the story of how you came across Hedera and how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, it helps that Hedera Hashgraph happens to be, they have a presence, a headquarters here in Plano, Texas, where I'm actually in Frisco, Texas, but the neighboring city. So after I sold my last company back in 2018, I moved. I was temporarily living in a little 1-bedroom apartment down in Austin, moved back up to my house here in Dallas or in Frisco. And I just kind of stumbled across actually Lehman Baird. I don't recall exactly what it was, but there was some sort of an event that he was hosting at Thomson Reuters here in the area. And I thought, man, that's really neat. At the time, and still to this day, I don't own any crypto. I'm not a big, crypto blockchain sort of, evangelist or anything like that. I've always had my friends try to get me into buying Bitcoin and all that. That just really wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't understand it. I didn't have time for it. That was kind of my stance. But I was just really interested in this concept of, this is something different than blockchain. And I'm familiar with Gartner's hype cycle. They've documented this quite well, where, you have these first and second generation technologies, innovative technologies that get all this hype, and then they kind of get tested and fall into what Gartner calls this trough of disillusionment. It's this lull, and I believe that's where blockchain and DLT still kind of is. Well, then according to Gartner, what happens is then second, third, and fourth generation technologies come along and say, I'll see your first generation and raise you this, and they improve upon it. And it kind of is a slower, gradual increase up and to the right, adoption in market, mass market acceptance over time. And those are the ones that stick. We see it get played out over and over again. Gartner, they kind of know what they're doing. They a lot of research goes into this concept. That's what I believe Hedera is. And so I was interested. And so I joined, and that's where as Michael Llewellyn mentioned, I met Michael there, and then he hosted one as well a couple weeks later, and the rest was history. What really clicked, the moment that clicked for me was, I remember that even though the solution, the engagement and recognition solution that we sold tens of millions of dollars in annual subscriptions to companies all over the world on was so good, the shortcomings were this: user adoption. Users were not using the solution as well as they could. These companies weren't seeing the user adoption that they could, primarily because most employees just thought, yeah, this is neat, but it's also just another solution, another software solution I need to remember a username and password for, and I need to use because I'm an employee. I'm obligated to use it. There's really nothing in it for me. And guess what? They were right. Many employers today say people are our greatest asset. Culture trumps strategy. We support and believe in you, the employee. But really the asterisk underneath that is, so long as you're employed here and doing your job well. This 3IEIO is a solution that actually allows those employers to say, we actually do support you, Jeremy Fletcher, the individual that you are, regardless of if you stay here or not, or whatever you might do. We hired you, and we believe in, you know, so now that you're here, we're going to support you as the person that you are and aid in your growth. And we hope that through that, we'll get the same benefit that you will out of it. It's just a different dynamic. And I think that's the winning dynamic, especially in the world we're in today. And again, the last thing I'll say on this is that when you bring in a DLT, a distributed ledger technology platform that can handle that amount of throughput in the utmost security and privacy and fairness, like Hedera is proving over and over again that they can, above and beyond any other, you know, first and second generation blockchain alternatives. It allows for all those other grandiose use cases and adjacent use cases down the road that DID will enable to actually become real and adopted. And I'm sorry, the last thing I'll say, why Hedera Hashgraph? Why did I jump on the bandwagon? Well, I obviously have a little bit of a bias because now I'm well invested into the tech, but honestly, guys, aside from all that bias, I really do believe that they are the real deal. The way that they're structuring from the governance council to ensure fairness, to ensure that, I believe that they're really striking the well-needed balance of how distributed ledger and decentralized assets can actually enter into an enterprise world. I think one reason why, I have to name them, sorry, but like Ethereum and other in their earlier phases and the way they presented themselves to the market, they weren't just why enterprises and businesses didn't jump onto it, was because there was just, it's so nuanced, but there was just so many areas that were gray that they really couldn't, there wasn't enough structure. So it was that battle between open source and free for everyone and all this, and versus, well, but we need some structure in these areas. And I'm not technically inclined, nor do I have the time to go into all of that, but that's kind of it in a nutshell that I've seen. And what I'm noticing now is that Hedera Hashgraph is doing an amazing job striking that balance.
Right. Yeah. And for myself, I saw fairly early on in my involvement in crypto and DLT blockchain space, I was super excited. I mean, I remember a coworker of mine came to me, and I want to say this was probably March or April of 2017. A coworker of mine came up to me and said, "Man, we got to start mining cryptocurrency. This is, this." And I was like, I've heard of Bitcoin, but I wasn't really that familiar with the space. But he was just convinced that this was the future and that we had to get into it. And I was like, well, and then we needed to start pouring some capital and some resources into this. So I said, okay, all right. I really like the guy. I said, okay, well, let me take a look. Let me kind of geek out for a little while. And I mean, it was amazing. It was a lot of things that, I mean, I've been a gold and silver bug forever, right? So when I finally, initially when I had heard about Bitcoin back in 2012, I heard of it, in relation to discussions about Silk Road. And in my head, I said, okay, well, that's cool. I like it, but it kind of sounds like PayPal for criminals. And I kind of put it on the shelf for a while. And then when it came back into 2017, I'm like, wow, this thing Bitcoin is still around. And people were starting to get really excited about it. So let's take a look. And I started to dig in, and it was really exciting and really having a great time learning about Ethereum and Bitcoin and blockchain. But at some point, I came to a conclusion, I think probably similar to yours. I said, this is great, but the enterprises that drive adoption, even though I know we're trying to shift gears and we're trying to decentralize and, and push technology and this experience to the edges and democratize technology and the exchange of value, said a lot of the big movers that are going to really drive adoption, they're not going to buy in. And it was right around that time when I discovered Hedera Hashgraph, and I went, okay. Yeah. Now there's a governance model, and there's something to be said for crypto anarchy and that movement. It's an ethos, and there's a part of me that loves it, but there's another part of me that says, okay, that's cool, and I've got some privacy coins and stuff that I keep, off to the side, and it's not against those. It's just that serves a different purpose in a different community altogether. I said, well,
Sure.
if we really want to move the needle on adoption, we're going to have to get some big players involved. And so, and it was, like I said, it was around that time when I found Hedera, and like yourself, I said, okay, now we might have, it was along, of course, with the governance model, the high throughput, the security, the fair ordering, all these things. I said, okay, now we may have a shot. We may have a chance. Michael Llewellyn, if you don't mind explaining, I know you mentioned that you had gotten into, you were mining Bitcoin back in high school, if I remember correctly, which is super cool. And I love the story that you tell, because had I understood what Bitcoin was back in the day, and had I been young enough to be in high school, and utilizing library bandwidth and computers and stuff, I probably would have been mining Bitcoin on school library computers myself. But if you would, so given that, fast forward a few years to 2017 or 2018, whenever it was that you landed on Hedera. How did you find Hedera, and what got you into the space? I know you guys are both Texans, and so it may have just been a byproduct of the geography, but if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got into this world.
Yeah, so I was doing I started out with Bitcoin in 2012, and I'd been in the space, like I would say the kind of the Bitcoin crypto community around Texas pretty early on. I was at a lot of the early Bitcoin tech conferences they would have in Austin, Texas. Went to a lot of the meetups, and on top of just working in the space. And so I hadn't really heard of Hashgraph up until that end of 2017. And there was this, and the funniest thing, it didn't come through a crypto or blockchain source at all. It was actually a gold, silver education series it was interesting. It was one of those things where they were educating you on financial history and how money is created, and also kind of maybe, putting a little bit of fear into you in terms of, oh, that's how money's created. Oh, I should buy some gold, that kind of thing. And the funny thing is, they ended up having they did 4 or 5 episodes, and then they ended up, the next in the series was actually a crypto episode where they're like, well, let's look at Bitcoin and crypto, which was very well done considering they didn't have any prior knowledge of it. They did a good job on the research, but that was just the first half of that particular episode. The second half was all about Hashgraph, and their pitch was that this was kind of the next step. And I found that very interesting, because I was like, oh, interesting. I've been working in this a while. I haven't heard of this new approach. And then I heard that, on top of hearing Dr. Baird talk a lot about his ideas, I also learned that they're in Texas. And I was like, oh, that's even more interesting. And so from there on, they were kind of on my radar. And eventually we saw them. I think the next time I heard about them, outside of what I was researching, they were being discussed at Thomson Reuters when I was working there, because they also found the approach interesting. So, and then from there on out, they were pretty, and that was, I think that was just within Thomson Reuters, the company. And then they did the meetup at Thomson Reuters. And from there on, they've been very present in the Dallas community. So they become hard to miss.
Right. Right. Yeah. The Hidden Secrets of Money. For those of you that haven't seen them, I don't know if you were intentionally dodging the mention of the names, but yeah, I think there's a lot of folks in the Hedera community that stumbled across the Hidden Secrets of Money, and that I think it was episode 8. I mean, that's how I discovered. And in going down that rabbit hole of cryptocurrency. And really just consuming, like Andreas Antonopoulos talks about, just consuming as much knowledge as you possibly can, to the extent that you forget to eat and forget to sleep. I mean, there was that period of time where I just had to consume as much knowledge about this as possible, and discovered Hedera Hashgraph through that same series. So I can certainly relate to that. So moving in, I'm going to keep it with you, Michael Llewellyn, if that's all right. And if we could talk a little bit about 3IEIO and the technology, how is it, how is 3IEIO built? What role does Hedera play? Those are the two main things that I'm interested in for our discussion currently. Is how is 3IEIO architected, and where does Hedera fit into the picture?
Gotcha. So I'll find a diagram while I'm talking, but essentially what we've gone for is we're building it as a typical web application with Hedera kind of nestled in there in a way that really, I think, keeps the user experience fairly smooth. So what we started with is a very, very basic application in terms of the structure. It was a React application working on the front end, writing in JavaScript. and written in JavaScript. And on the back end, we had a Node.js server with a MongoDB database. So a very typical web app. You would see a lot of them built like that. And we focused a lot as well on design. We had a great designer, Justin, who built that, as well as some great developers, Luis and Nish, who did a lot of the grunt work in terms of putting together both the front end and the back end server. And then really the extra piece that turns us from like what would be a normal web app into a, I guess you could call it a decentralized application, is the fact that we have a Hedera microservice running in addition to our normal server, and that communicates directly with the Hedera consensus service. And so whenever a user logs in or creates a new identity, let's say, it will generate a new identity on Hedera through that microservice, store the result in our database, and build it out so that basically users are able to then send any recognition to Hedera, verify it as a recognition. And so every time you create a recognition, you can then go over to the Hedera Explorer, like Dragon Glass, and see that transaction was created, and see as a way to verify your credential was stored there. And then, over time, you can build more on Hedera from any interaction you have with others in the application. Now, currently and just to say, it's currently got keys stored on a database right now, but our long-term plan is to eventually decentralize that so that users have direct key management. But we're taking a different approach than maybe like other applications where we want to keep it user-friendly in terms of key management. And currently, they will rest with the employer, but later on they'll get direct access.
So, Mac, are you able to take us through a little, are you able to take us on a spin? Or can you take us on a little test drive?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of take all of that again for the non-technical people, including myself on the call, on what was just said, and how does that actually come to life?
Right. What does it look like? Take me for a spin.
All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
I think you should be able to share.
I think so.
Great.
I did mention I was the non-technical, but let me know when you can see the 3IEIO logo here.
Got it.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I've got a couple of slides that will help this. So the idea is, here is what a sign-in screen a user might be met with if they're signing up organically. The reason why I mentioned that is because if you're an employee of a company that licenses this on a business-to-business level, then you would sign up a little bit differently. But the idea is you come in and you can authenticate with your Google account, you can authenticate with a LinkedIn account, and that will verify your identity to create your DID profile, and then off you go. The way that we're interacting with customers today is we are intentionally keeping the interface extremely vanilla. So without doing anything, this is what the interface might look like. Our branding is on there very simply, and there's a couple of little sections, but what we want to bolster user adoption is allow companies to put their own branding in this. So, selecting primary and secondary colors, adding some logos, so it feels more personalized for them. They can call it what they want. 3IEIO branding does not need to be anywhere in the user interface, and then they can start using it and giving each other meaningful recognition. Once they're verified employees, now associated with a verified company or another entity on the platform, they can now start using semantic search to look up a team member and start to give them recognition. They can call out a core value, and we're using the company's core values, however they label them, to build them in. And they can also type in or select from a list of a skill set, similar to what you would do on LinkedIn if you're endorsing someone for a skill set there. The difference here is the interaction's verified rather than frivolous on LinkedIn. Once they start using this and recognitions start being shared among employees, you can actually go to your profile and see recognitions that you've received, recognitions that were sent. You can take a look at the top core values that you were recognized for, you recognized others for, those sorts of things. And then also on here, this is an example of a main activity feed where you can see all of the public recognitions that your peers within your organization are sending each other, and have the ability to like and comment on them. So the example I love to use here is, imagine that new employee that is an entry-level employee at, let's say Wingstop, for example. It's a popular fast food wing place here in the Dallas area. He or she stays late, helps with the customer order, and they actually, the customer is really pleased by the experience, that they recognize that this person stayed late, but they got their order right. The wings smelled and tasted great. And that customer wants to recognize that employee. Well, this is just an example, and this is not a disclosure. This isn't built in yet. But Shinola, one of potential early adopting customers of ours, might be doing this, where on the name tag, they're going to offer a QR code, which will actually link to this person's DID profile. So the idea is customers can scan the QR code, and it'll automatically take them through this very simple authentication process, and the customer can give a recognition to that employee, and it can be socialized and shared. Otherwise, employees can just recognize each other. Now, Shannon Washburn, who is actually the CEO of Shinola, but in my example, I'm using Wingstop. Imagine the CEO of Wingstop is on his or her flight back from a big business meeting in New York, and he or she's thumbing through to just check out how their core values are being lived out and what people are up to at all their retail locations. And he or she happens to see this recognition from this new employee, and that CEO decides to like it and comment on it. How do you think that new employee is going to feel that the CEO recognized my job well done, me demonstrating this core value of the company, me demonstrating these skill sets? You start building a culture like that. And one of the biggest takeaways for companies is that they build a culture of appreciation. And when you talk about attracting and retaining your talent, because employee turnover is very costly, this is something that you can do that works a heck of a lot better than even money, because this employee might think twice about going to Buffalo Wild Wings just because they're offering an extra $1 per hour, because they know that at least at Wingstop, I mean, the CEO frickin' sees what I'm doing and recognizes me for it. That, especially in these younger age demographics, holds its weight in gold. So that's the example I like to use. And then lastly, I'll tie off with, of course, data visualization. How can the HR teams with admin access and the individual users start to see how their skills that they're recognizing are being recognized for, values they're recognizing and being recognized for, how are they tallying up, and what can they make sense? How can they make sense of them? We offer dashboards for that data visualization aspect of it. So that's kind of the less than 5 minute, or however long I babbled there, overview of what it is.
Well, having worked in big corporate America, I can say without a doubt that getting respected as an employee is worth a lot. I know and have worked with guys, that were getting paid top dollar, right? Top dollar in their industry. But at the end of the day, they still weren't happy because they just didn't feel like the company gave them any respect, right? They didn't feel like they were recognized for what they were doing. They didn't feel like when they went home, they didn't feel like they did a good job. Even though they were working as hard as they could, they weren't getting that feedback that told them, that yes, you are in fact important here and you are doing a good job. And a number of people, I've seen people leave high-paying jobs because, at the end of the day, when I go home, I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good about my life. I want to go home and feel good about myself, and I'm willing to make a little less money. No, it's not for everybody. Some people are just like, I don't care. I'll just make as much money as I can and forget about the rest of it. But a lot of us, we really need to feel like we're appreciated and respected in our places of work.
You're seen. And imagine now everything you just said in the post-COVID world we're in, where companies are looking to adopt this work from anywhere concept. They're forced into the virtual office capacity. Well, this is something it's easy. Our license fee is $5 per user per month. That's it, all inclusive. and even less than that for larger user bases. But for that little bit of an investment, which is, you know, a cup of coffee per month, you get these cultural insights, you get that sense of belonging, you allow people to actually engage with each other in a meaningful way. And people can feel like, you know what, I might be out on an island, or feel that way. And now I'm in my home. But at least this little bit of just dialogue and engagement with my team, and having visibility to the teams around me that I may not engage with day to day, you know, it bridges that gap.
Right. So one of the questions that it raises for me, and I have to ask this. So we all have had bad days,
Mm-hmm.
and if you've ever been in a customer facing role, or even if just as an employee, and maybe you've had either a customer or a supervisor, somebody that was having a bad day, and they just lay it on you, right? So maybe I had a bad day, and you know, I tied off a few too many on Sunday night. Now it's Monday and I'm a little grumpy. Or similarly, maybe the customers just had a really frustrated day and they come in and you're the first smiling, happy face they see, but they're just on you, right? So if, let's say in the instance where one of these circumstances has happened,
Mm-hmm.
is that bad day, or is this customer's negative comment? I mean, is that going to, you know, with this blockchain, you know, everything sticks around forever kind of stuff. I mean, is that going to stick with me when I go to my next job and they're going to go, well, you know, it looks like you're a pretty good employee by and large, but you know, you've got some bad days too. And, you know, of course that's natural, but do these things, are they going to stick with me when some customer slams me for no reason?
That's a great question. It's a popular question. The quick answer is no, it's not. And for multiple reasons. One, the behavioral science behind 3IEIO is that these are designed and built for recognitions of jobs well done. So you're calling out skill sets demonstrated, and you're calling out values that are demonstrated. So unless your company has a core value that will portray something negative about you, not going to happen. Or unless you know, someone decides to type in a skill set of jerk, it's not going to happen. And then furthermore, you know, like Michael Llewellyn alluded to earlier, DID allows the user to have full control over their data, what they do with it, and how it's shared. That's the beauty of this. Is, you know, for GI. I just had a brain fart. GDPR compliance. Yeah, so all these acronyms and all of that. So it kind of falls in line with that as well. The user, there isn't some public ledger out there that displays in real time the way the world's recognizing you, good or bad, and you have no control over it. That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay. And so that does raise another question for me, if you don't mind. So with the user being able to carry the employee or the user being able to carry these engagements with them wherever they go, have you run across any issues, or have you run across any HR departments that are concerned about employees being able to take engagements with them, right? I know a lot of companies are very protective about anything that happens within their own environment, you know, like, well, I'm not going to allow this customer to say, or this employee to say that they got this, that, or the other thing said about them, because some big companies just want to they protect everything, you know, keep everything on lockdown. Have you run into any issues, or is that an issue or a concern for you?
Mm-hmm. It's one we've considered. It's not one that we've come up against yet, but it's definitely one that we considered. So yeah, if a company is like, no, we consider that intellectual property, right, a skill set or a value that an employee while present here was recognized for, it'd be kind of silly to recognize that as intellectual property. But some employers might. And in that case, we're not for you.
Gotcha.
This isn't a solution for you, then that's fine. But here's the alternative. Most companies, when they really get a good feel for what 3IEIO is and what value it brings, they want that information to be public. They would like for that to be public because if you think of like Glassdoor and all these other those solutions are kind of designed for disgruntled employees that, you know, got let go or whatever the case might be, to go in there and write a negative review and just offer that up. And there's nothing that you can do about it. Glassdoor is a real thing. They call it the Glassdoor effect. 3IEIO, in a sense, offers a different view. If employers and employees allow for this data to be shared outside of the walls, because it allows them to say, first and foremost, we invested in a solution like this because we want to give our people a voice. We want to invest in our people, and we truly invest in the person and their growth just by simply having a solution like 3IEIO. Number two, here is actually the core values of our company and real world verified examples of how they're being lived out.
Right. And so in these instances, and I apologize if I'm being devil's advocate and throwing curveballs at you.
No, it's great.
But so another question that's come up a number of times is, okay, so what about the bro effect, where you've got two guys that work together day in and day out, and, okay, so like at one of the companies I worked for, we actually had a system of points where you could get money for having, for being a good boy, right, and having good behavior that aligned with the company's values. What prevents, what kind of stop loss do you have, so to speak, for the bro effect, or where, folks are going to be just kind of patting each other on the back and giving each other kudos that may not necessarily be recognized by the company as a whole, because it becomes excessive at some point. Obviously, you want to exhibit the company values, but if you've got two people that are just giving each other kudos on and on, it devalues that engagement, so to speak.
Yeah, great question. Another popular one. So first of all, the risk reward there is kind of, why would any, right now, the way 3IEIO sets, we don't incorporate rewards where there's a monetary aspect to these exchanges, these interactions. And I say we don't do that yet. There are plans down the road to incorporate a digital currency, because we're built on a distributed ledger technology platform that will bring a lot of benefit to these arbitrary points-based systems where it's based off one point equals 1 US penny. It's just a big mess the way they're trying to do that these days. So that's number one. But even if there was a monetary aspect to it where the impact of that nefarious activity might be greater, there's safeguards that are built into the system that we call nefarious activity report, that will allow you to see an admin to see if two users are giving each other an abnormal or an outlier amount of recognition to each other. So we also flag for things that where in the free form commentary, if there's anything that's offensive or that shouldn't be shared. So if a user flags it, it gets flagged. If it gets flagged twice, it gets taken off the feed and an admin's alerted in the report to investigate. So those are the two things that we do to kind of tackle that. The last thing I'll say on that is, in the tens of thousands of users to date that I've personally licensed solutions to that allow for this sort of engagement with monetary aspects tied to it, rewards tied to it, it's like less than 1% of times that you even see anything remotely close to that type of activity.
Okay, so kind of an outlier circumstance in and of itself. Gotcha.
But even if it wasn't that, there's safeguards and things built in to protect against it. Yeah.
Cool. Michael Llewellyn, I'm going to hand one off to you for a minute. So what are some of the big obstacles that you've run into? DLT is a very new space. I mean, some of us that have, if you've been entrenched in the community or in blockchain and DLT, like you have for quite some time, this may all seem like old hat, but it's still new technology. I mean, this is, the past, 10 years, 8 years. I mean, that's in the, in the grand scope of time, that's a very short period of time. So I imagine that there's tons of obstacles. I know from a business aspect there is, but on the technical side, Michael, what are some of the obstacles that you've ran into, and how are you overcoming them?
That's a good question. There's definitely differences, I would say, between the obstacles you face with Hedera versus other platforms. I think you typically see definitely scale, and concerns around that are definitely a lot better with the current Hedera ecosystem. I think the biggest challenges we're seeing now is the fact that in a lot of cases with Hedera, because it's still fairly new and because the ecosystem's still fairly small and, but growing, we're typically the first to do a lot of things. So the DIT SDK, I think, as far as we know, we were the first ones to actually use it. For the most part, it worked very well, but there were definitely some quirks that we had to work through. Got to speak with Paul Mattson, who was one of the people that helped create it, and work through some of those. And as well as the fact that, a lot of these problems that we're facing are kind of new in terms of keeping our data on MongoDB in sync with what happens on Hedera. We've luckily been able to solve a lot of those issues with kind of an event-based architecture for the most part. But I think those are just the fact that we're typically the first to do a lot of specific things, and that both means that on the technical side, like we just have to take a little bit longer coming up with the solution, but on the flip side, it typically does lend a competitive advantage. So risk and reward.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that in our own experience working in this space. And this is something that, Rob's familiar with this. My partner and co-founder, Rob, is familiar with this term that I've kind of cooked up. But I tell him he'll bring some issue to me. And at first I would say, well, Rob, we're part of this big community. Why don't you go ahead and reach out to some people and see if there's some solutions out there. And inevitably he would come back and say, no, there's no solutions yet. And so I said, Rob, you're on the cutting edge of trouble. And what I meant by that was that, if he ran across a problem, as talented as he is, when we get around to it, and looking for solutions, it was like, wow, there really aren't any yet. So we've got to build it. So that is I can certainly relate to, and I know my partner can relate to that challenge in this space, is that it being new, sometimes the challenge is just that the solutions just haven't been built yet. How about you, Mac? What are some of the challenges that you've ran into on the business side? Are you getting crossed eyes from investors and strange looks, or are things starting to look a little bit better for you? What's your experience on the business side?
Yeah, no, lots of crossed eyes. Yeah, absolutely. It's
dotted T's and crossed eyes. Was that?
Yeah, exactly. Dotted T's and crossed eyes. No, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm being, somewhat facetious, but no, there is definitely progress, and compared to just a year ago, but no, nonetheless, from investors to even companies. I think honestly, the COVID is kind of a blessing in disguise for what we're doing, simply because of what I mentioned before, that companies are just like, okay, look, they're being forced into adopting solutions to help with that are easy to deploy, easy to adopt, and actually have a shared benefit for the employer as well as the employee. And also some of these other social movements that are happening, where we're leaning towards really meaning what we say and practicing what we've preached in the past about, the cliches of people are our greatest asset, and those sorts of things are now starting to come to fruition the way they always should, where even some of the big corporations with all the bureaucracy and red tape are starting to adopt things like diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias trainings, and those sorts of things are kind of in that same vein of like, what, we really do freaking care about our people. We don't know exactly how to practice that yet, but we're going to start doing things that show that bring those things to life. And so 3IEIO is that we're trying to find those tracks, those progressive, forward-thinking companies that are finally doing it right. Because I know this is going to be a real grandiose claim, but my belief is the companies that don't, they're going to get left behind in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. So Michael Llewellyn, there was a little bit ago, we had kind of dove into the tech a little bit, and we kind of glossed over a little bit because I know you were looking for, did you find that the slide that you were looking, or whatever it was that you were looking for? I didn't mean to gloss over the technical bit, because the technical part is really exciting. Even though I'm not nearly as technical inclined as my talented partner and Llewellyn yourself, I am very interested in the tech and follow it and apprehend as much as I can. So I didn't mean to gloss over it. Were you able to find that bit that you were looking for?
Unfortunately, I did not. I gave up searching halfway through for something else that caught my attention. No problem. Let me see. I could pull it up. I think I know where it is. It's just
that's okay.
A couple clicks.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand it back over to Mac then real quick, if you don't mind. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Oh, no worries.
I think I had seen it before, and it gave a really nice little diagram of what it is that you're working on. So I wanted to give the audience an opportunity to kind of take a gander at that, and we could go back over it just a little bit to give people a little better idea of what it is that we're talking about with the tech. But I'll hand one back over to Mac. 3 years, I know this is kind of the bird's eye view. It's difficult to project in the future, and sometimes you don't want to because you don't want to jinx things, or it's just, we're so entrenched in solving the problems that we have in the here and now. But looking 3 years out, Mac, where do you hope to see? Where do you think you'll see 3IEIO? What do you hope to see? What are you afraid you see? What, looking 3 years out, what's your, if you kind of get the direction of the wind, what's your sense?
Well, my sense is that it'll be a solution that's well adopted. I mean, obviously I'm going forward with a level of optimism, but I do have the safeguard built in that, I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, even if the DID and all this other fancy stuff that we've been talking about that we believe is truly an X factor doesn't take hold, it's still an awesome recognition solution. So which has already, as Jeffrey Moore would say in his book, Crossing the Chasm, has crossed that chasm into mass market acceptance. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we've got that business. But I believe, though, that the other stuff will catch, it will become prevalent, will become adopted. In fact, I think our solution acts again as a stepping stone into that, because right now we're not talking about credentialing, licensure, that one day you won't need a social security card or a bank account. Like, okay, great. No, all we're talking about right now is there's some really awesome stuff that's being exchanged in these interactions day to day. Every time you clock in and out of work or engage with a partner, a customer, and a fellow employee, there's awesome engagements and interactions, things that could help you and your HR team that are living and dying in that moment. So let's capture it. Let's use it.
Right. And I think that's really wise, to take an approach where it's like, hey, look, regardless of what you think about DLT, blockchain, crypto, decentralized identity, sovereign identity, any of this stuff, blah, 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 right? Because I know if, when you, like you said, the crossed eyes that you get from investors and stuff, a lot of people don't really care at the end of the day what the underlying technology is, right? We just want to provide a solution that makes sense, that's going to get traction. And I like it that, I think there's been, there's a lot to be said for companies within the blockchain DLT space that are working to kind of keep the technology aspect of it under the covers or under the hood, so to speak, and really just provide a solution at the end of the day. It's just a good solution, regardless of what technology you're using. It's something that people are going to want, people are going to need, and it's going to provide value to them. So I think it's a wise strategy, and I commend you for it.
Thanks. Yeah.
Michael, did you find what you were looking for over there?
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here.
Awesome.
There we go. All right, you should be able to see it.
Yep, got it.
Yep, so this is
cool.
Yep, so we got ourselves a nice 3-layer stack. I guess depending on how you like to define layers, but essentially we have a typical front end with React as well as an Nginx server that's serving it up. That's going through our API service. Typical Node.js app, which is also connected to MongoDB. And then below that, you have the Hedera did microservice. It's running the Java did SDK in its own container. All this is running with Kubernetes, by the way, on Google Cloud. And then that then talks to the Hedera network through the Hedera Consensus Service, and it's going to store both recognition and user identities through DID documents on Hedera through essentially a messaging service. So you can subscribe to certain topics and see recognitions from the identity saw in 3IO.
Okay. So if there's any, I know for the viewers that are out there, if anybody has any questions about any of the stuff that we're discussing, I haven't really taken a minute to reach out to the folks that are out there that may be watching this, but please feel free to, if you see any of this stuff and you have any questions about any of the technology or the business aspect of it, anything that you may have questions about, please feel free to, throw them into the chat, and happy to share them around and discuss them. So, please don't, please feel free to chime in if you've got any questions out there. Okay, and so this was kind of one of the things that we hinted on it a little bit, and so I'm going to jump back over to Mac here. Well, either of you could address the question, but are there any bonuses and incentives, and so aside from just the employee engagement, we talked a little bit about the incentives, and that was one thing that I found that in my own experience really drove my engagement with an application like this, was the ability to receive some kind of reward. And one of the examples that really the best example that I can give was, so I participated in this program with the company I work for, where if you did a good job or you got some kudos from one of your employees, that you would get these points, right? And the points would add up, and for about 6 or 7 years, I didn't even pay attention to the points I was accumulating. I was just, I would, get a little kudos from my boss or from an employee that liked a job or a customer that liked a job that I did or something like that. Well, fast forward, so now after, 6, 7 years later, I bought a house. Well, I bought a house, and it's got a little bit of land, got a little bit of a yard, and I had all kinds of trees and brush, and there was all, it hadn't been well kept for the time, before I bought it. It was a little, the yard was a little overgrown and stuff.
I can see that behind you. It looks like it's still overgrown.
Right, that's the canopy oak trees. Yeah, in Savannah, Savannah, Georgia is, when you look at Savannah from, let's say from the Talmadge Bridge, which goes over across from Georgia into South Carolina, when you look down on Savannah, you don't see any houses or anything. All you see is trees. So yeah, we are in the midst of some serious vegetation here. Mother Nature is alive and well here in Savannah. And with Mother Nature, knocking at the door, right, when I bought this house, I didn't have, I'd moved out of a condo. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have a lawnmower. I didn't have a leaf blower. I didn't have a weed whacker. I didn't have anything to take care of this 1/3 of an acre lot that I just bought. And so I started looking at, an employee said, well, hey, why don't you use your employee points? They got all kinds of stuff on that little catalog. I said, oh, well, I had completely forgotten about those points. Let me take a look. So I opened up this, got online and opened up this digital catalog of things that were available, and it was incredible. I was able to get all the stuff that I need. I got a nice new Troy-built lawnmower, weed whacker, leaf blower, edger. I got all this cool stuff, and I didn't have to pay a dime for it because I got these rewards. That's a long way of coming around to ask the question, what have you got planned for? Is there any, are you getting any interest or intrigue from anybody that you talk about that, they're saying, hey, we do have intentions of adding some kind of point system or maybe tokens, or, what's going on with that? Is there anybody talking about that?
Yeah, there is. And Michael Llewellyn, can I take a stab at describing some of those, and then maybe you can talk a little bit more from a technical perspective on ways we might actually build this in, because we've intentionally left it out of the roadmap for now, to allow that our customers to have those asks and for us to build that critical mass to actually build it in as a standard offering. So because we can build it in. And in fact, some of the solutions that I've used in the past, that I've sold in the past, had a points-based system, as I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned earlier, also, they bring on a whole nother layer of complexity. Now, we've ideated the ability to actually build in a digital currency, which eases the complexity actually. So one way that might work is similar to probably what you had experienced too, Jeremy, is that a company's reward budget will actually fund points that go into a given balance for the employees on a, so every month or every quarter or every year, employees will just be given a bucket of points to dole out arbitrarily and at their in a discretionary manner while they're giving recognition. And it does help a little bit because there are some people out there that like to give points and receive points so they can later redeem them for certain things. Because when you bring in the whole rewards aspect of it, it is a whole new animal on its own. But I love it because with past solutions, you've got these things where you're not just redeeming them for a weed whacker in the company catalog or some swag or an airline voucher. We've had it to where you can also redeem it to give to your favorite charity. And your company can have programs to where whatever you give to your favorite charity, your company matches that donation. That's pretty cool for some people. Everyone's different, right? And then the other thing is there was this story of past where employees could pool their monetary points together to do certain things. And one of the coolest stories that I've been a part of were this one company that I have to leave unnamed, one of their employees suffered a house fire and he could not afford to pay his insurance premium, and employees pooled their points together to pay his insurance premium. How cool is that? Right?
Awesome. Yeah.
So we want to bring that aspect in also. So right now it's not there because most of the studies that we've done is that the points and rewards aspect does not really alter the utilization or the appeal of a solution like this. That's just what the data has shown us so far. Okay. But we can build it in, so we can do it in two ways. The easiest way is we will allow for points to be added and doled out and shared between users, just an arbitrary point. And the rewards redemption and all that can be handled outside of 3IEIO. Okay. And then the other way is, yeah, we would probably build in a digital currency service. And I don't know if that would be Hedera's native HBAR or something different, but we can, and that's where I'm going to now shut up and let Michael Llewellyn kind of talk about ways we might incorporate that.
And before we take over, that's one of the super cool things about Hedera is that you've got that option, right? I mean, you can use the native HBAR if that's something that is within your purview and something that you can do as an organization, or you can build your own token. And there's a lot of talk in the space right now about asset tokenization or just tokens in general. So the fact that you can do either or, use one or the other, if creating a token is a little bit more friction than you desire and you just want to use something that's already existing and already on the market, on these exchange markets and stuff, you can do that. Or if you want to build a token, you can do that. That's one of the cool things about Hedera is that you've got those options there at your disposal. But go ahead, Michael, take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I don't think there's too much to add to what Mac was saying. I think in terms of the way we would technically implement it would be if we wanted to add in like recognition, we'll basically add in the incentives on top of recognition for doing payments through some sort of a token structure. We'd definitely be doing that on Hedera. I think the big question would be what standard would we follow? Could we do it with the consensus service? I know people talk about that being a possibility, but it's something that I think we still need to explore. So that's I think the main thing is likely also on the Hedera consensus service, but the way that token gets structured might be an interesting question, as well as how it would be valued. Is it tradable? Or is it some sort of a stable coin? These are all like things we'd probably want to dig into, especially when we want it to be as simple as possible still for the user.
Right. Yeah. Stable coins could also, that's another option that's on the table that could be a great alternative, because stable coins certainly make it easier to grasp the, from an economic standpoint, the volatility of these crypto assets, kind of might leave your typical user to go, oh, I have at any given point in time, I have no idea how much the stuff I have is worth, because it could be so very different from one day to the next. So the stable coins certainly could be a good alternative as well. All right, so we did have a question that came in. Cooper, all right, great to see you. Great to have you on here. So the question came out, do you think that I'll ever be able to sign in with either Hedera or 3IEIO via DIDs, like sign in with Google, Apple, or Facebook?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So that's actually a great question. And I want to make sure I'm not just dusting over this. What we've been talking about up until now is the business to business engagement that we would have with other companies out there, where they could license a business solution. That's a paid solution and I mentioned earlier, an average of, $3 to $5 per employee per month, all inclusive, and so that's where we're at right now. But 3IAIO is available for anyone individually to go in and set up an account, and then they can. That's not paid. Where it becomes paid is when they want to actually associate with a company or a group. Then that group or company needs to have a paid instance so that association can happen. And then now they can have kind of a community start to build, if you will, whether that is a community of employees under the same employer or just another outside group. So those are examples of the paid instances, but until then, because I gave the example earlier about how a customer could give that new fry cook recognition. Well, how does that customer need to be an employee of a company that has 3IAIO? No, that customer can go in, authenticate with their Google account and or LinkedIn account, and now they can create their profile. It's not going to be as feature rich, but they can at least search for and recognize other people and receive recognition for themselves that's values and skills based. So that's the example of the freemium version, I guess you can say. So that's the long-winded way of answering that question, that yes, you can. I will say this, that we are still in kind of our, so we actually placed third in the Hedera 20 hackathon just a couple months back. And so we're really proud about that. And, they were like,
no, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that was
I
awesome.
didn't mention that, and I apologize for not mentioning that before, but we're kind of, it's been a couple months now, I think. Gosh, I don't even know where are we in the year? This year is so strange. It's been going by, so fast and in kind of this surreal way, but yeah, so I apologize for not mentioning that before, but super win with the third place there in the Hedera 20 hackathon. Awesome takeaway there.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very validating for us, and big shout out to Michael Llewellyn and Luis and Anish and everyone, and Justin and everyone that was on our team. Just awesome work. I mean, everything from just the work product itself to the code and documentation, and everything is just so damn pretty and awesome, even for someone like me that's not technically inclined to appreciate that. So that was great. And shout out to Be My App and to Hedera Hashgraph and everyone that came together to host that. It was a really awesome 6-week virtual hackathon. I think there was like 45 or 48 teams across the globe that participated. So for us to actually be recognized in the grand prize winners, top 3 across all those is super awesome for us. We're really excited about that. But I bring all that up to brag a little bit, but also just to say that, that's kind of where we're at right now. We're still in these early stages. We are, and Michael can correct me, but we're kind of in that alpha dev sprint still to go into beta. We're bringing on early adopting customers that we strategically selected. I kind of shared one of them, hinted at one of them in the screen share earlier. So we're looking at notable companies that have large employee bases and unique, kind of vertical markets and organizational structures. So that's kind of the path that we're taking. So right now, if you went to, I can't give you a URL to go to sign up for your own 3IAIO DID profile, but it's coming soon.
So that does kind of bring me back around to this discussion of DIDs. And Michael Llewellyn, I was wondering if you could address that a little bit. Where are we at? A DID being a fairly new spec or protocol, so where are we at with that, and are we at a point where, are you at 3IAIO at a point where you can really use the DID specifically for things like logins? And while you get into DIDs a little bit, I'm going to go turn my overhead lights on because I'm starting to look like a ghost here. just disappear into the darkness here. It's getting dark here in Savannah. I'm listening. I just got to go flip the light switch.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly, it's a space that's definitely still new, and we're, it's one of the reasons that we were kind of the first to do it in the HR space, and we're definitely seeing a lot of other industries where it's just now taking off or just now being explored. But in terms of the adoption, we're fairly confident because we are seeing a lot of big players, working in the same space. Microsoft, for example, has been using blockchain technology for its own decentralized identity product. So they have obviously a lot of reach with their blockchain service and their potential products, a lot of which could have great implications for identity, including LinkedIn. But we also are seeing areas in, IBM is also looking at this, and even one of the Hedera projects, I think way back, C Ledger, is working with Evernym, which is another company that does decentralized identities. So, and even Everledger itself, or Evernym, I should say, they're also seeing a lot. They've got a lot of great partners, both in government and in industry. So we know that the interest is there. I think we're just still in that very early stage where I think the more commercial aspect hasn't really been explored. It's mainly been more, it's just now coming more out of the research and development phase.
Right. Yeah, I actually had a discussion with somebody, it was this morning. Was it? Yeah. No. Sorry, yesterday, where we were talking about, what day? That's Monday. No, it was today. Yeah, I had a discussion with somebody about a decentralized identity solution that's being put forward by a federation of credit unions. And so there, you mentioned Evernym, and this, there's a digital identity wallet there. That they've created, this connect.me, and it's being used. So starting to see some real world use cases, it's starting to kind of creep up. So that's really exciting for the industry to see some real use cases starting to hit the streets and companies around. And I use a credit union myself. I'm excited about, going, and I'm actually going to go to them and ask them, what kind of solutions are they building for decentralized identity? Because I'd like to see, it certainly would make it more convenient for my wife and myself to be able to, because right now with credit unions, so the credit union that we use is in a different state because, we signed up with it when we were living in a different state. Now that we've moved, we have to use the sister branch. It's not actually part of the same company, but whenever we do these transactions, we've got to fill all kinds of paperwork. If I just wanted to deposit a check and some cash, we've got to fill all this paperwork because it's a sister branch, and they've got to do all this authorization stuff. But if they were able to authenticate me based off of a decentralized identity, it would make things so much more convenient. So really excited to see these real world use cases starting to pop up, like 3IIO. I get the sense that you guys are going to be really well positioned in the future that we're moving into here. There was another question that came in, and it's for Michael Llewellyn. So we are I'm going to start kind of winding this down a little bit. We're at an hour and a half now, and I was enjoying the conversation so much. I missed the hour mark by a long shot. That was 27 minutes ago. So I apologize for, to either of you, if you had other, I usually make my best effort to be respectful of people's time. This is we do set aside 2 hours for it, but I know that once we get over an hour mark, these sessions can kind of get a little bit long-winded for some people, especially if they've got dinners to cook or, jobs to get to or whatever it is, So this will be kind of my way of starting to wrap it back up and winding it down a little bit here. But Michael Llewellyn, we'll start with you. Do you have any favorite projects that are being built on Hedera besides 3II?
Ooh, I would say, in addition to Walla Wallet, I would have to say, I think the winner of the Hedera Hackathon, and I think I'm actually going to look up their name now, but I know what they did was they were really trying to go for the interconnectiveness of Hedera in terms of taking what the Hedera Consensus Service offered and giving people a way to hook that up into other ecosystems. So that they built, and I'm looking up that name now just so everyone can check it out if they want, but it basically gave everyone a way to directly connect to Oxiles. It's an event listener where you could bridge Hedera between both other blockchains and backend microservices, with the idea being that, if you had an existing Kafka cluster in your enterprise, and so you already had data streaming through that, but you just wanted to add some immutability and trusted execution to it, you might be able to bridge that over into Hedera. So it's a way to make sure that, you know, you don't have to necessarily start from scratch. You could potentially bridge from an existing data source or event stream, as well as the potential for bringing other blockchain ecosystems into Hedera. Maybe even cross-chain communication. I'm not entirely sure. You know, I'd have to see what they're doing with the solution now, but I know they had some very interesting future ideas for where they wanted to take it.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to see more cross-chain solutions out there. There was a talk on one of the Hedera forums recently where they were talking about the tribalism of the crypto community and how we tend to, you know, and I'm guilty as charged. I mean, look, I got my, you know, I'm guilty as charged, but at the same time, I would love to see more of these kind of cross-chain bridge use cases, applications, things that are, you know, because at the end of the day, a lot of us got into this space because we want to move the needle and push, you know, society at large in a particular direction that's a little more democratized and a little bit more fair, or a lot bit more fair. And so I would love to start seeing some of these bridges being built and some of these chasms being crossed where the tribalism breaks down a little bit at least, and we're able to actually start, you know, looking at the solutions that are being built across the space at large and leveraging those tools and use cases for the benefit of all, and not just for the benefit of our little siloed tribe that we're, you know, that we've become accustomed to. So with that, are there any, so Mac, back to you, are there any other use cases or any other projects out there that have sparked your interest besides Walla Wallet? I know Walla Wallet, which is the Ledgerama's HBAR wallet solution. We know Walla Wallet's amazing. Thank you very much, Loam, for throwing it out there. Shameless plug. I'm not afraid of shameless plugs. But are there any other projects out there, Mac, that you've had your eye on?
Yeah, actually one that's just recently joined, and I haven't had the time to really peruse or dive in deep into what they're doing, but but the Chopra Foundation so they are, they have a really, it sounds like they have a really interesting use case, and I'm going to read it right now, honestly. So I'm kind of cheating here, but it's to democratizing wellness resources. So yeah, I saw this, and I believe it's connected, you know, and I hope I'm not mistaken here, but with Deepak Chopra, perhaps, maybe, I'm not sure. Yeah. So I've always been a big fan of Deepak, and just based off of that alone, and in the little bit that I've read on it, and I can share that as well in the feed, but with the Chopra Foundation. And I also just kind of have a natural appeal to not-for-profit organizations that are doing things with innovative tech, you know, for charitable or altruistic type things. I think that those are use cases I'm just naturally drawn to. So those would be the reasons I would pick Chopra Foundation.
Right. And yeah, and actually a lot of people are, you know, in my process of doing, you know, I've talked to tons of people over the past year and a half. I found that charities, by and large, I mean, people are in these times are a lot more willing to put their money where their mouth is. I get that sense, at least in the community, at least at the community level. So, you know, one of the things that I've asked people is, you know, talking about incentives for this, that, or the other thing, these other use cases. And they say, well, you know, incentives are great, but really probably what I'd rather have is if I could just donate my incentives to a charity organization. I heard that over and over again. So glad you brought up the Chopra one. And it's an interesting one too. And there's a lot of, you know, I mean, right now in these times with, you know, people being on lockdown, and it's a tragic thing in a lot of ways. You know, I mean, I look at, you know, just my own family as an example. I mean, you know, my daughter's, you know, in 4th grade, and she's stuck here at home doing virtual school, and she hates it, you know. She's really struggling with that. And so I know if my 9-year-old is struggling with it, that means she's a smart, bright girl. I know there's tons of other people in the world that are struggling with these issues that have really been forced upon us at this time. And so, you know, so it's great to see some solutions out there that are really, you know, going after a more kind of psychological, holistic approach, and leveraging technology for these kind of more spiritually inclined or charitably inclined use cases. So thanks for bringing that one up.
Yeah.
So before we go ahead and bring this one to a close, what's the best way for people to follow 3IEIO, follow Michael McDonald and Michael Llewellyn and the things that you're building and working on, for the folks that want to keep their eyes on you and, and watch what's coming down the pike? What are the best ways for people to either contact you or stay in touch or just keep an eye on what you're working on?
Sure. So there's two ways that, so 3IEIO is actually 3IE.io. So that's our web address. You can go there and I believe it's working. It should be, to sign up for, the RSS feed or the notifications or newsletter that we put out. You can also just simply go to our LinkedIn company page as well. I'm an avid LinkedIn user, so feel free to follow our company page which is you can just do a search for 3IEIO, and we should be the only one that pops up. And then of course through there, feel free to send me an invite as well. I welcome all invitations to connect on that platform, and I'm happy to answer any questions or engage with you all. Yeah.
Great. How about you, Michael Llewellyn? What are some of the best ways? What are your preferred methods of people keeping in contact with you or keeping an eye on what it is that you're working on? Should they go to LinkedIn as well, and 3IEIO, is that the best way for you?
Pretty much, yeah. LinkedIn is pretty much where you'll find all the stuff that I'm up to. Sometimes I give a few talks in addition to these Hedera meetups, so you can always follow me on there and figure out what I'm up to.
And I highly recommend, by the way, I was able to watch one of the webinars that you had there. It was one of the blockchain. I think it was about security. It was security and blockchain was the webinar. So I was able to I was able to watch that one, and it was enlightening. Really good experience. If I remember right, you've got you do some teaching as well. So it shows you're well spoken, and you're really good at explaining the technology in a way that's relatable for folks like myself that don't really have a super deep understanding of the technology. It's great to be able to hear somebody talk about it in a way that's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense to me too. It's not just purely technical. You're really good at breaking it down for everybody. So I either recommend following any of the stuff that Michael McDonald or Michael Llewellyn are up to. And before we bring it to a close here, I do want to give another quick shout out to Creative Coast that hosts these meetups for us. Jen Bonet over at Creative Coast, she has been a very valuable mentor to me. She's a serial entrepreneur herself. She's raised millions and millions of dollars of venture capital, and she's been a great asset to me. And the Creative Coast does a lot of great things for technology, particularly in Savannah and the state of Georgia. So I want to give a shout out to Creative Coast, and also to my partner and myself, Ledgerama. The solutions that we're building right now, we just got through a security audit for our wallet, for our HBAR exclusive wallet called Walla Wallet. We just got through our security audit for our Android version. Really excited about that. So any folks out there that are looking for our goal is to build trust online. And with that, we've built a wallet that is bulletproof, secure, rock solid, stable, and user friendly. So highly encourage anybody that needs a mobile HBAR wallet out there to take a look at Walla Wallet. We've got some more exciting things coming down the line. If you're an iOS user, please stay tuned. iOS is right around the corner. It was just a little bit more challenging to develop, so we're working on that, but iOS is coming right around the corner, and the Android version will be in full production here very soon. So with those things said, is there any, let's see, I'm gonna check the chat here, see if there was any other questions or concerns that popped up. Okay, some kudos from the team. Thanks everybody for the kudos, much appreciated. I really look forward to these every month. It's a great opportunity to showcase other projects that are building on top of Hedera, like Ledgerama is. It's a pretty close-knit community that we've got, so I really enjoy being able to showcase these, and look forward to, I'm not sure, let's see, I haven't set in stone who it's going to be next month, but I know it'll be another exciting project. So I hope you all can tune in next time. And again, it's the first Monday. Typically, it's the first Monday of every month. We shifted gears a little bit this month because of Labor Day and went for the second Monday, but typically it's the first Monday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. in the Eastern time zone. So please join us again next month. And with that, unless there's anything, Michael Llewellyn or Mac, you got anything else you'd like to add before we take off?
No, nothing to add other than I just want to share gratitude again and express it to yourself and to Creative Coast and to everyone that helped put this together. And thanks again for indulging us for the last hour and 39 minutes.
Absolutely. Happy to.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to. And I look forward to, when next time, maybe a few months from now, 3 to 6 months or something, when we've got more to report on from 3IEIO, we'll circle the wagons back around and we'll do it again.